You're listening to the Patriot Nation podcast.
All right, welcome into another edition of the Patriot Nation podcast. As always, your boy Pat Lane here with my guy Matt St. Jean. And Matt, the Patriots regular season has officially ended, but before we can start mock draft season, we are on head coach alert.
Yes, we are.
All sorts of different names coming through, and it's shaping out to be a good one, I think.
Second year in a row. We've been not that it really happened
last
last
no process last time.
Yeah, but we thought we were going to get one. Nobody knew about the Mayo clause at first.
Right.
I've been doing this show for 3 seasons now, and every one of them there's been some kind of coaching whatever at the end. So this is par for the course for us. But this is kind of again a unique moment in Patriots history that we're about to see, and some interesting names to watch. I'm sure we're going to get into it. I think we have our favorites among the bunch.
We do. Yeah. Yes, we do. That's definitely true.
I'm guessing you have someone you like, and I probably have someone I like, and I don't know if they're going to be the same person, so we can get into that. But it's going to be an exciting offseason in Foxboro, or at least eventful.
Wow, and that's definitely eventful is a good way to put it, right? And I think my opinion on this has fluctuated, and we'll kind of get into kind of how we feel about it and everything else. But I did we're going to listen to a little bit of. We have some audio for you guys of Robert Kraft's kind of statement to the press, and I think that he kind of did a pretty good job of taking some of the blame because realistically, right? Let's just be honest. Gerard Mayo wasn't ready. He wasn't ready. And Kraft should have known that. And I think he panicked the year before. And, he panicked the year before. And then he said, well, I'll throw this thing into his contract. Yeah. Not thinking that would be the last year of Belichick. Thinking that Belichick would coach for 3 more years or so. And then he might be ready at that point.
Did you see the Chad Graff article this morning?
I did not.
Because actually, it talks about this specifically. Really good article on The Athletic, I recommend. But he talked about how apparently the plan was once Mayo got 3 or 4 head coaching interviews in one offseason. And we know that the story of the post-Brady years was that coaches kept leaving Foxboro and not even post-Brady, this started in 2019. Coaches kept leaving Foxboro for other jobs, and the replacements just weren't as good.
Right.
So Kraft's plan was, I like Mayo. He's young. He's already being highlighted by other teams as somebody they're going to want. Let's just jump on this now and say he's going to be the guy. And the idea was that was put in the contract in 2023 that Bill would coach for 2023 and 2024, probably hit Shula's record, retire, and then Mayo would take over. Obviously, that is not how things went. The article describes how Bill became reclusive and kind of froze out a lot of his staff and wasn't talking to anyone. Obviously, the team lost quite a bit. Right. You're at a spot where you feel like you have to fire Bill, which, I think that was a decision we both agreed with. Problem was then you're promoting someone, you hoped he was going to get 2 full years of mentorship there to be ready to step into the job. He's effectively gotten none, and you're still asking him to step into it. And that's how it looked. The Krafts clearly overestimated what his abilities were, and they deserve the blame for that, and they deserve the credit for moving off of it quickly and not doubling down on a mistake.
I think that's the other part to focus on, right, is that so often we focus on the negative parts of it, right? And of course, it was a mistake, and they probably, they shouldn't have hired him when they hired him. And we can talk about all of that stuff. But again, as you said, they do deserve a little bit of credit for being able to. I was listening to Diana Rossini was on, Pardon My Take this week, and she said, I couldn't believe it. Like we understood it and it makes sense. I can't believe they actually went through with it, right, and got rid of Mayo. And I just think that the situation was untenable. And Kraft even said I put him in an impossible situation, in a situation that he, that it just wouldn't work. And unfortunately, there wasn't enough talent around him. And so anyway, so we can kind of get into all that stuff, but I did like the fact that he took some of the blame. Why don't we listen to some of that, and then we can kind of get into our reaction to it, and if anyone in the chat has any reaction to it as well.
Yeah, so this is Robert Kraft spoke to the press on Monday, 1 p.m. I think it was.
Yes.
This was his opening statement before he took questions.
This whole situation is on me. I feel terrible for Gerard because I put him in an untenable situation. I know that he has all the tools as a head coach to be successful in this league. He just needed more time before taking the job. In the end, I'm a fan of this team first, and now I have to go out and find a coach who can get us back to the playoffs and hopefully championships.
So there's the words from Robert Kraft there, and I think it's well said. Easier to say it than to make these words translate into action, which has been the issue for them for a while as an organization.
Yeah,
but it's better to. The saying has also been hard for them in the last 12 months.
It has been. That is also true, and I think too, you never like to look bad, right? And Kraft, more so than some owners, really cares about his image. He cares so much about how he looks and how the fans portray the Patriots and him. He cares about that, right? He mentions it all the time that he's a fan and he wants to do best, the best thing possible for the fans. And I do believe that, by the way. I actually do believe that. And so, the hard part is that it's not easy to take responsibility. It's not easy to take the blame, right? But he deserves it, and he owned up to it. And I was happy to see him take that. Now moving forward in the future, what does that look like? Does that mean that he makes the right decision here? I don't know. Maybe, but not necessarily. And that's really what it's going to come down to, is that did you learn from your mistake? And I think part of the problem is that, and one of the things that I didn't love about last offseason is that they didn't take the time to interview anyone. Mm-hmm. They didn't interview anyone. So you don't know what other people are talking about. You have no idea. And so, that's why this offseason I felt like, let's take as much time, not necessarily as much time as we can, but let's interview as many people as we can. Yeah. Because if we go through and interview a bunch of people, well, now we know what we're looking for. Oh, well, we want this guy. We want this. This is what we're looking for. Oh, this guy said that. That makes a lot of sense. I like the way that sounds. Well, okay, someone, and you can kind of go back and look at those things. That makes a huge difference when you're hearing what other people have to say. You have a multitude of candidates, and sure, the first candidate could come in and blow your socks off. And you're like, wow, this guy really knows what he's talking about. This is great. And the next guy comes in and says things that you hadn't thought about previously. And you were like, oh, yeah. Okay, now I see the vision. I see what, so it's those types of things that you're not just looking for what you're looking for. You also need to be on the lookout for what is going to help you the most.
Yeah, no. And that's why this might go multiple rounds. We'll see how they handle the full process. I mean, you want to be thorough. And then there's also a point where you almost don't want to be too thorough. You don't want to psych yourself out. You don't want to overthink it and hyperfixate. If you thought somebody was going to be the hire and you checked the box, and then you hyperfixate on something you hadn't thought of before and get cold feet because of some random thing that, hadn't been a priority for you at any point before that, that's also a poor process. So it's balancing the thoroughness and the detail work that's going to come with this with also trusting your gut and just making a decision. And there's always a reason not to hire someone. I
Right.
think the candidates, and we'll get into the candidates, but I think all the guys that they've brought in, really, especially the top three, are all coaches who could go on to be, great head coaches in this league.
Mhm.
If any one of them completely flamed out in New England, I don't think it would be a surprise to anyone. This is not an exact
Right.
science.
Right.
So, so you can't be afraid of that aspect of it. You can do all the right things and have it flame out, and you can do all the wrong things and get a good head coach.
Yep.
But yeah, I do want to go back to some of the background to this, to how we got here.
Yeah.
Because one of the things in that Chad Graff article I thought was interesting was noting like the way that Belichick kind of removed himself from the situation. We've heard a lot about how last year his side of the staff and Bill O'Brien's part of the staff were not like on speaking terms. It seemed like by the end of the season, like they just didn't interact, which I mean is just like
Crazy.
yeah, and it's we've heard Bill talk about this at points. In my eyes, he sounds a little bit cranky about the situation, and it's. I think you have to go back to 2017. I think one of the big turning points here is supposedly, according to Seth Wickersham, when Bill wanted to trade Brady and keep Garoppolo and build around Garoppolo, and Kraft stepped in and said no. I believe Wickersham is the only one to ever officially report that, so I don't.
Right. He is.
I don't know exactly how true that is, but that feels like kind of a turning point. It feels like ever since then, it's been a series of instances where Bill has tried to do something. Kraft has stepped in. Most of these times, I think I've come down on Kraft's side. The trading Brady part, the Matt Patricia, Bill O'Brien situation is one of them. There was one other one in there that just the Alex Guerrero stuff and like the everything about giving Brady more power after the Falcons Super Bowl. Like Brady had never been asked to be treated like a star his whole career. I don't think you can get upset about him finally asking to do it the last couple of years. I think that's something you have to be willing to concede at that point. And it felt like Bill was not willing to concede that at points. I do think Bill was right on supposedly wanting to trade Mac Jones.
Yeah.
That was one that he was right, and the Crafts were definitely wrong on. But it seems like you have this downward spiral where Bill's ego keeps getting bigger, and he keeps trying to do things that are big, bold moves. Seem kind of silly, and Kraft's telling him, no, we're not going to do that. With each one of those, Bill becomes more and more suspicious of what's going on, and his circle gets smaller, and coaches leave, and his circle gets smaller, and that's how you get to 2023. And this is like, I don't know who to blame for this, because I don't think that the Crafts are in the wrong for stepping in, but also it's clear that the manner in which they handled it didn't work.
Right.
The idea was for Bill to mentor Mayo. That didn't happen. If you want that to be what happens, you have to make sure Bill is on board with that plan. He wasn't. So what's going on here?
Right. Well, and that's the thing, right? Is that to choose someone's successor and basically ask them to train their successor without actually asking them to train their successor. It just doesn't make any. That's terrible leadership.
Yeah.
Now, and Thad mentions that he doesn't believe that Bill tried to trade Brady. I don't know if Bill tried to trade Brady either. I do believe that it got brought up at some point. Like, hey, if we want to keep Garoppolo, like we might have to move on for Brady. And in that instance, I can see Robert saying, there's no way we're ever trading Brady. Like, we just can't do that. And so I don't know if that was an idea that Belichick had or simply something that they were talking about, like, we can't keep both guys. The interesting part about the Garoppolo thing, and I don't want to spend too long on this, but the interesting part about the Garoppolo thing is that they waited to trade him, right, until 2017, mid-season.
Yeah.
If they had wanted to move on from him, the most leverage that they had was that offseason. Yeah. Not trading him that offseason was dumb, just flat out stupid. they had no leverage once the season started. And so, so that's, so anyways, but that's neither here nor there, but it's an interesting way to look at it. And I think you're right that Kraft does step in at certain points, and, him having that clause in Mayo's contract is just fascinating, especially the fact that Bill clearly wasn't on board with it. And you are kind of right in the fact that it did feel like at the end that Bill was just kind of holding on to what he was doing, and that he eventually got to a point where he just said, well, I'm just smarter than everyone else, and I can just figure it out on my own. The Matt Patricia thing was a joke. Like, it was like, well, he knows defense, so like he'll be fine on offense. We don't need a real offensive coordinator. He'll be fine. And like, the offensive line situation was a disaster. The cornerback situation was a disaster. Like, you had all of these things that happened where Bill just could have stepped in or could have done more, and he just didn't, right? And so it's just one of those interesting things where you look at it and just say, like, man, like they really screwed themselves the last 5 years or so with with talent development.
Well, and it all has to start at the top, and it's all on the
100%.
Kraft there.
Yeah.
Do you think it's interesting, like, just going back to the Bill part of it? You read Education of a Coach, and you learn about Bill growing up and how he became such a great coach. And one of the big keys in there is not having an ego, the ability to take ideas from anyone in the organization, for anyone to feel like they can challenge you. And that's why, one of the reasons that Bill is able to, in practice, in training camp in 2008, go at Brady and put up low light reels of him in front of the whole team and attack him, is because, you look at around the coaching staff and the players, like, he would still listen to them and respect them. It was this mutual kind of, I don't know how to put it. Anyone could call anyone out.
Exactly. Yeah.
Accountability. That's what I'm looking for.
That's the word.
Down the organization. And I mean, you watch the old documentaries about the early Patriots, the 03 team, the 04 team. Like, you see that all over the staff. And that's why some of these guys became such good coaches around him. Obviously they didn't last outside New England, but in New England, they were really good at what they did. I mean, they developed players too and made players smarter. And that just seemed to fade. Like, I don't know if it was Bill getting older.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't, and you're right. Like, it did. The whole thing was about the team, right? And by the end of it, and the hard thing is that, you have some people in the Boston media who always perceived him as this egotistical maniac, right? I don't think he was that for the majority of the time, right? I do think that rightfully so, he thought that he was smart, and he thought that he had coaches around him that could coach guys up, right? I think that, in 2022, when you had that disaster of an offensive line, you had opportunities to go out and sign guys, and you chose not to do that, right? I'm sorry, 2023, you chose not to do that. You chose not to sign Mike McGlinchey or Jawan Taylor or Orlando Brown, and instead you brought in Calvin Anderson and Riley Reif. But you didn't have the guys anymore. You didn't have Dante Scarnecchia coaching up your offensive line. You didn't have those. And so it's like the coaches under him weren't as good as they were before.
Nope.
And that hurt him because he can only do so much. And so it's just one of those hard things where, like, he looked at it. I think he almost leaned back into what he had always done and what had worked for him way back when, and said, like, we can win just on, like, grit and want and everything like that. And that's just not the case. And so, and like I said, you get the brain drain of, like, all those good coaches leaving. And it's not really even just the coordinators. It's those, those position level coaches. And, Flores took guys with him to Miami. And then, Caserio takes guys to Houston, and McDaniels took a few people to Vegas. So it's like you lose all these guys, and it's like this middle management type of thing where it's like, yeah, you still have some of the guys, but, like, you lose some of these important kind of lower level guys that those guys are the guys that can grow. And you just didn't have that anymore, unfortunately. And, and that definitely hurt them.
And here's the thing, in another world, you give Bill another 5 years, we don't know, let's say age is not a factor. You give him another 5 years, we don't know what it looks like, because to a degree, we had seen this happen before. We remember, the 05 and 06 Patriots when you lose coaches, the coordinators, and then 09, I think that was Dean Pease who came in that year to work with the defense. And the way the team looked, wasting really good offenses for the better part of a decade there.
Yeah.
But it's like that's one of the funny things that people totally forget. Bill, the guy seen by many as the greatest or one of the greatest defensive coaches of all time, had a pretty long string there. They couldn't draft defense. They couldn't play defense. It was,
bizarre.
Basically, as the 03-04 group retired.
Yeah.
It took them really until 2014 to finally replenish that group. You get the time to do that, one, because you build a fantastic offense, two, because you've banked 3 Super Bowl wins, and they're going to stick with you through a lot. And you keep winning games, because the defense give up a ton of yards and miraculously force turnovers and get off the field and all that, which helps in special teams too. You're allowing a lot more yards in some of these situations because you're pinning teams back, so they have an extra 10 yards on every drive if they have to go. But yeah, no, it was this whole weird thing. Like, they traded for Aqib Talib because they couldn't draft corners. They signed Darrelle Revis because they couldn't draft corners. Then all of a sudden, the Malcolm Butler and Logan Ryan generation comes along and kind of rebirths everything. But yeah, that was a whole thing there. And that's why we talk about them not drafting receivers and not being able to draft offensive line lately. And that could have just been bad luck. If you gave Bill 5 more years, he might turn it back around. We're not going to have an issue. Problem is that he's 70-something years old. And yeah. And, to Kraft's point, the Kraft side here, Bill had kind of always said that he wasn't going to coach into his 70s, really.
Yeah. But
you cannot blame ownership for trying to have a succession plan. And that's not the issue. The issue was the organization was not fully on board with the plan. The people who needed to be on board with it were not on board with it. And they stuck with a plan that they should have known was a bad plan. Now, big picture, this might not hurt them because, like last year, if they had wanted to not hire Mayo, who are they going to hire? They're going to hire Mike Vrabel, or they're going to hire Ben Johnson.
Right.
Well, look where we are. Like, long term, this might actually not be that big of a deal this 1 year, and maybe it helps you because you get an extra high draft pick here in the middle, and like in your gap year post Belichick, basically. But yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, it's a strange situation. So, but here we are. This is the situation that we're in, and it's I would say it's everyone's fault. It's Belichick's fault to a certain extent. It's Kraft's fault to a certain extent. This year is Mayo's fault to a certain extent, and I think Elliott Wolf deserves some of the blame as well for what he did.
Oh,
and I'm curious about the hard thing, and this is what you don't know. The rookie draft class looks awful, just downright terrible, right? Layden Robinson improved a little bit later on in the year. Caden Wallace looked okay at times. Jalen Polk was a disaster. Javon Baker was a disaster. Like, I think that the Joe Milton pick could turn out to be a good pick, but, part of you wonders, or at least I can't help but wonder, how much of that is on coaching and how much of that is on the player development and the player scouting. And, did they get the evaluation for Jalen Polk wrong, or were they not coaching him up? Were they not putting him in the right spot? Right. And I'm not saying that he's going to be like an all-pro receiver or something crazy like that, but could he be a serviceable wide receiver? Could he be a guy that can actually get on the field and do something, if he has different coaching? Of course, we don't know the answer to that question, right? But I'm hoping that that's something we can find out as we move along, and kind of goes for all those guys.
Yeah, no, and I think that's kind of the one of the big things for the next staff here is what of the last 2 draft classes really do they think they can salvage and make work?
Right. Yep.
Big question, because like Polk, definitely a reach with where he was taken. Like he was still seen kind of at worst as a third rounder. Third round receiver, you should be able to find the spot for on the field, you'd think, especially the guy with his abilities. So, yeah. I want to go back to one other aspect of this Chad Graff article that I thought was interesting that we haven't talked about here so far. And this kind of reversed something that we talked about last year when we talked about the coaching situation. We had kind of assumed that Steve Belichick left the Patriots because he wanted to go do his own thing. We now found out that apparently it's because Gerard Mayo refused to offer him play calling responsibilities.
It's really interesting.
Which also, that, in my eyes, almost changes the way you look at the Belichick, the Bill Belichick part of this. Because the implication in the article was Steve Belichick would have stayed if he got to keep his play calling duties like they'd had before and got to be DC and all that. Which, if Bill gets ousted, but both of his sons stay on staff, I think that says a lot about how people internally feel about the way the Crafts have handled the situation. Like if his sons are staying on, then clearly internally there's not this feeling that there's this big betrayal that it's been portrayed as. But then what the hell is Mayo doing? If you had told me last January, February, whenever it was, that like Steve Belichick left because Mayo refused to offer him play calling duties, I would have said that's idiotic to not offer him that.
Stupid.
What are we doing? It's an awful process, and I think had I known that information then, I would have viewed this entire situation through a different lens from the very start.
Absolutely. Look, I like DeMarcus Covington a lot. I think he's a great guy from everything I've heard. I know the players really like him a lot.
He was good as a position coach.
Very good as a position coach. Clearly not a good defensive coordinator. And like he was also a first-year defensive coordinator working with a first-year head coach who was in over his head. He was put in a really difficult spot, right? Not only is he working with a first-year head coach, he's working with a first-year head coach who was also the defensive coordinator last year. So it's all this stuff going on. If Belichick was willing to stay, Steve Belichick, of course, was willing to stay on as the defensive coordinator, it's unfathomable that you wouldn't have kept him. It makes no sense that you wouldn't have kept him because you say to Covington, hey, look, Steve's going to probably move on and get a head coaching job at some point, or he may go to somewhere else or whatever. Like, you stay your position coach. We'll learn a little bit. We want you on this track, right? You were defensive coordinator for the, Shrine game, I think, or whatever. Like, we want you doing those things, right? We're going to get you some more experience. And then when you're ready, we'll get you this. And I think that, he wasn't ready, obviously. And he was rushed into that. And it's like, especially when the person in-house you knew was good and could do it, not having him do it is ridiculous. And honestly, if I were Kraft, talk about Kraft stepping in with Belichick and stuff, I can't believe he didn't step in with Mayo and say, dude, what are you doing, man?
Yeah.
Well, that's brutal.
It's not good. And it's, something Dan Campbell said at one point, which I think part of this is him just trying to hype up his coordinators. But he did say that when you're that type of head coach, your most important job is who you hire. And this is clearly the mold of head coach Gerard Mayo wanted to be. He had every opportunity to step in and be defensive guru and try to lean on that, and he never took it. So what he wanted to be was the CEO type, overseer of everything, manager of everything. And when that's how you want to be, who you hire is very important. And I love DeMarcus Covington. If there was a world where you could keep Covington on staff and just send him back down to his old role, I think I'd take that because he was good at it.
Yeah, he was.
But that's where the cat's out of the bag now. You can't put that back in. That's not going to happen. Covington's got an interview in Cincinnati to be their defensive coordinator now. And you might end up, I don't know. I just that was a hire that you really couldn't afford to get that badly wrong. And here we are.
Right. Well, look, and you can complain about AVP and say that, the AVP situation was what it was because no one else wanted to work for you. Right. And you could say that was on, other people not fine. That's fine. But at the end of the day, you only have yourself to blame in the defensive coordinator situation because you could have brought someone in from the other side. You didn't. And not only could you brought someone in from outside, but you also had an opportunity to kind of have him and you didn't. And so it's like, that's the frustrating part where it's like you had the guy in-house. Not only did you not bring someone else in, you had the guy in-house and didn't do it. That's ridiculous.
Well, and Steve was the play caller for it, not Gerard. So, like,
right.
If this happens, the only thing you're changing about the defense really is that you're going to need a new linebackers coach to replace Mayo with that unit.
Right.
And I forget if other people left in there. I forget some of the details there because I know they brought in a bunch of other coaches on defense. But like they really could have left it status quo, and now just Steve's going to run it, and that would have been fine. I think. Right. I mean, that's the implication of the article. So it's tough. I wish Rod Mayo the best going forward. And it's like all of this seems like Kraft has always felt like he's kind of had just this intuition for whoever the best coach is going to be, which obviously hiring Bill Belichick as part of that intuition gave him a ton of confidence that his intuition is correct.
Right.
He felt that feeling again with this guy, tried to set up a plan, and just, I like the idea, the approach, I think is totally fine. You didn't evaluate it well enough, that's all fine if the guy is good, but you didn't get the evaluation right and you stuck with the plan, even though the plan wasn't the plan. Like the plan was for Mayo to become the head coach starting now after Belichick had just retired.
Yeah.
Well, that's not where we are. So like what? Yeah.
And
I guess I'll credit him to sticking to his word and giving Mayo a chance, but this is a multi-billion-dollar organization we're talking about. We shouldn't be doing that. It's.
I agree.
We're trying to win every year here.
Oh, I agree. All right, let's take our first ad break and then we'll get into some of our stuff here.
Alrighty.
All right, so this ad break, of course, is for Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. It's playoff time, and that's now or never. Don't miss out on the last few weeks of football action with Prize Picks, the best place to win cash while watching the playoffs. They offer MasterCard and Venmo, which you can do quick and easy deposits and withdrawals into your sports, your account during sports season. Now, for me, I've been on a little bit of a cold streak, as you all know. That's stretched basically my entire life, but I feel like I'm feeling good about this one. I'm going Justin Herbert for more than 18.5 rushing yards. Ladd McConkey with more than 5.5 receptions. And Rashad Bateman with more than 2.5 receptions. That's what I'm going with this week. So what you're going to do is download the app Prize Picks so you can follow along with me. Download the app Prize Picks. Put in the promo code CLNS. When you play your first $5 lineup, again, you don't have to win. You just have to play. When you play your first $5 lineup, you get $50 instantly. Again, download the Prize Picks app, put in the promo code CLNS, and when you play your first $5 lineup, you get $50 instantly. Prize Picks, run your game. All right. So let's get into who our favorites are and what we're looking at.
Yeah, should we list all of the guys who either have or are interviewing first? And
let's do that. Yes, let's do that.
So Patriots have already conducted 2 interviews. One of them was with Byron Leftwich, who was the offensive coordinator in Tampa with Tom Brady. The other one is Pep Hamilton, who he's been kind of around everywhere. He was in Indianapolis. I think he was in Michigan at one point. He's been doing media stuff lately. He actually was really high on Joe Milton this year.
Super high.
Yeah. They're bringing in Mike Vrabel. We're doing this on Wednesday, so he'll be in tomorrow, I believe, in person. Ben Johnson, the Lions offensive coordinator, will do a virtual interview on Friday.
Mhm.
And Aaron Glenn, the Lions defensive coordinator, is also they request to interview him. I don't know when that's going to be. I wouldn't be surprised if that's also Friday, because that kind of fits in the Lions window to do this. But we don't have any official dates on that yet. Obviously, the Patriots are required to interview at least 2 minority candidates,
Which they've
already done that by interviewing Pep Hamilton and Byron Leftwich. They did both of those very quickly. 2 people who I think by many were not considered super serious head coaching candidates. Guys without the typical credentials, I would say, you look for in a head coach.
Yeah. Well, and look, this is one of the things for me that when it first came out that on Tuesday, literally the day after Kraft's press conference, 2 days after they had fired Gerard Mayo, they had conducted, not scheduled. They had conducted 2 in-person interviews with minority candidates.
Mm-hmm.
I was furious because for me, that was okay. We figured out the Rooney Rule. We're good. Let's hire whoever we want. And I just feel like the last thing you can do here is rush through this process. And again, I'm not saying take weeks, take months. I'm not saying that. But like, get some candidates in and, make sure you take the time. Talk to people that are actually qualified for this job. Liam Cohen is a hot name right now. I don't think Liam Cohen's ready yet. He's only been the OC in Tampa for 2 years. Like, maybe he'll be a really good head coach. I don't know. I don't know if he's quite ready yet, although he has looked really good. But, Ben Johnson is a big name. Mike Vrabel is a big name. Aaron Glenn, when they scheduled the Ben Johnson interview for after Vrabel came in the building, and then today when the news came out that they had put in a request for Aaron Glenn as well, that made me feel a little bit better about their process.
Yes, I agree.
I was really worried they were going to bring Vrabel in. They were going to, virtual interview with Ben Johnson on Thursday, bring Vrabel in on Thursday after that, and then hire Vrabel on Friday. Like, I was really concerned that was going to be the case. And now it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. You would assume, because they have the interview with Vrabel on Thursday, but then Johnson isn't until Friday. And then Aaron Glenn, who knows when that one will be. And so, that one might end up being Saturday. Maybe it'll be later on the day on Friday. I don't know. Because I think they have until Saturday, I believe, to do their virtual interviews, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
It's either Saturday or Sunday, I think. But
yeah. Well, and with the, we look at the timing of the process for coaches who are in the playoffs. I believe they can't do in person until after the divisional round. So
yes. Yeah.
For Aaron Glenn, for Ben Johnson, for maybe, a Liam Cohen. I don't know some of the specific rules. So it might not apply to all of these guys, depending on if they're still in the playoffs. But like, if they want to interview an Arthur Smith, Brian Flores.
Right.
I'm trying to think of any other coaches out there in the playoffs who might interest them.
Kevin
they
O'Connell.
Would have to wait. What was that?
Kevin O'Connell.
They would have to wait
next year's first round pick for Kevin O'Connell.
Yes.
Who says no?
They would have to wait until January 20th to do an in-person, I believe is the date on that.
Yeah.
So we'll see how long they take. Touching on the Rooney Rule part of this, the Patriots are in kind of a weird spot here because they are by far, I would argue, the most desirable destination. They have a high draft pick, the most cap space, and a quarterback. And I think what's also clear, based on Kraft's press conference, is that they haven't decided how they're proceeding with anything on the coaching staff or anything in the scouting department or front office yet. So anyone who comes in, I think, is going to get to remake any of those the way they would like, or keep people who are currently on if they like them, which is kind of a bonus. If you like people who are already in the building, you can go in with some infrastructure already in place if you're one of these coaches. So you're a very desirable spot. And the timing here is weird because you're desirable. You're probably going to end up going with Mike Vrabel or Ben Johnson. Those have been the top two people all cycle.
Mm-hmm.
You're the top job. Simplest explanation is you're probably going to end up with one of those two guys. But you also have to move fast enough to make it clear to those guys that you're interested, so you can because you're probably going to be the first domino to fall, but you also don't want to lose out on one of them because Vrabel, in theory, has interest elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Like spots he could go. He likes you the most, but he could go elsewhere. There's other girls he could date here.
Well, now even Vegas is an interesting one.
Yes. And then Ben Johnson's kind of a wild card here because last year it looked like he was taking the Commander's job, and he was like, you know what? I'm just going to stay in Detroit. And you don't want to be in a situation where you're hemming and hawing between the two of them. Vrabel picks something else. Ben Johnson says, yeah, I'm actually going to go back to Detroit. And you're left back at square one.
Right.
So it seems clear here that New England's approach was to fulfill that Rooney Rule obligation as fast as they possibly could so that they can take as little or as much time with this, and they have as much flexibility with the process as possible, which is a little gross. And I think, unfortunately, the reality of the situation and the rule. Here's the thing: without the rule, I think what happens is that it's just going to be Aaron Glenn, Ben Johnson, and Mike Vrabel getting interviews.
Right?
Is this better or worse? I don't know. It's a touchy subject, and I don't really know it's clear that they are skirting the rule here.
100%.
But
I
they're
will
also
say,
not violating it.
Right. And I will say that the rule exists for a reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, for me at least, even if the interviews aren't real interviews, like Byron Leftwich isn't going to be the head coach of the Patriots. That's stupid, right? Neither is Pep Hamilton. But I do think that those coaches are pretty good coaches. And so I do wonder if one of those guys ends up on the staff, right? Somewhere, maybe not as offensive coordinator, but ends up somewhere on the offensive staff. Could it be a situation where the guy ends up somewhere on the offensive staff? And I think that's an interesting thing to look at.
Well, and part of this too, the Rooney Rule that it was changed, I think, for this year. The interview, it used to be that you just have to interview two minorities for a head coach.
Now they have to be in person, right?
Which is what complicates it because some of the top minority candidates are Brian Flores, who you probably can't interview for 2 weeks, and
Aaron Glenn.
Yes, thank you.
Right.
Who you wouldn't be able to get. So it puts you in a spot where if you want to hire Mike Vrabel and he's your best, you could get caught with the timing on it because you're waiting for those. So it's weird. It's in the technicalities of the rule. It looks gross. I think it's just kind of what the rules have been designed to make happen, unfortunately.
Right. Well, and I will say, right, and here's the other part of it. I think that you can't, now that the fact that they're also interviewing Aaron Glenn, to me, now I don't think people will be upset, or at least shouldn't be upset about it.
Yeah.
Right? Well, you're also giving a fair shake to the best minority candidate, in my opinion. And Brian Flores, I just don't see a world in which the Patriots would ever consider making him the head coach. I think think about the people that were in Miami with Brian Flores at the end. A ton of those guys were Patriots guys, right? Chad O'Shea was a guy that was down there. Chad O'Shea, worked in New England forever. People that have been in New England for a long time are very close with Chad O'Shea. He got dumped after his first year down there. They had a good offense, and they just canned him. Yeah. And so, the way that he ran things down there, I think everyone kind of has a pretty good idea of what went on down there. And I don't think they want any part of that.
Ryan Fitzpatrick today was saying he was like a dictator.
It was bad.
He was running it. But it's Ryan Fitzpatrick, and I have my issues with him. But There's been a lot of consistent reporting about this for a long time that it was not well run. And
Right.
here's the thing: like I have, from everything we've seen in Brian Flores, I think he's probably improved over time, gotten better, and learned at this. We thought the same thing about Josh McDaniels, and he went into the exact same thing all over again. So
it's different when you're a coordinator. It's not the same thing. You
Yep.
only have to worry about one side of the ball. You only have to worry about your guys, and there's someone above you telling you what to do. When you're the head coach, you're the guy. You can say and do whatever you want.
Well, look, Brian Flores is someone who I think can be a very good head coach in the NFL in theory, if he ever, grows as a human to handle some of this stuff. I think if I want to hire him, I would have to have, first of all, the interview has to go very well.
Yeah.
Second, I'm not hiring him unless I got a veteran QB. You know what location to me would be interesting for Brian Flores? Like Dallas, if that was open.
Yeah.
Dak Prescott is a veteran QB. Micah Parsons is your chess piece on defense. Like, I think that would make some sense. Jacksonville, Trevor's a veteran QB at this point. Someone who can withstand some brutality and who's not going to be broken if Flores hasn't changed his ways and you got to move off it in a year or two. So those are spots where I'd consider it. New England, I wouldn't. Aaron Glenn, obviously. We all saw the masterclass, I would say, that he put on Sunday night to win the number 1 seed in the NFC with, in some ways, a defense less talented on paper than what the Patriots have had all year with the injuries that they have sustained. They have some of that with Sam Darnold having a seeing ghosts type performance there, but they induced it. They were the ones that got him out of rhythm.
Right. Well, I think that's, to me, that's so interesting because, some of the criticisms on Ben Johnson is that he has a fantastic team. He has a great offensive line. He has good wide receivers, but the talent is there. And Aaron Glenn, talent isn't there anymore. It was, right? They have a very talented team defensively. But the fact that they got 13 defensive players on IR, like it's, and obviously not all of them are starters, clearly,
and Terry Arnold got hurt during the game, right?
Yeah.
That's your first round pick.
Right.
Your best corner.
He's been very good this year. And, but you lose Hutch for the year and you lose, this guy and you lose that guy and this guy goes out and Aleem McNeil. Did Aleem McNeil play on Friday or was he still out? I can't remember.
Melifonwu finally came back, but
right.
Amik
Anzalone
Robertson
was back finally, but
the way that they've coached up Amik Robertson and gotten him to be what he has been for them. They found a corner and developed a guy who can cover Justin Jefferson.
It's pretty unbelievable.
Well, this is something they talked about on the Athletic Pod after the game, is that when things get hard and you got your down players, you got injuries, coaches will tend to do one of two things. You either lean more aggressively into whatever your identity is to try to maximize that out of your group, the guys that you've coached all year, you just go into something that they're going to know really well, or you go the opposite and you basically back out of it and try to readjust to whatever your new personnel is going to be. Aaron Glenn was like, we are going to go full bore into this thing. They want to be a man coverage team. They decided we're going to be a man coverage team. They played the Minnesota Vikings with Justin Jefferson, and they just dialed up a whole bunch of a whole bunch of man coverage in that game and played it well and made it work. And dialed up. Listen, I think it was the most cover zero they played in the game all year long.
Just wild.
But they know who they are. They committed to it and then they executed it. And that to me is a sign of great coaching. For Aaron Glenn, does that translate from being a coordinator to a head coach? Who knows?
Yeah, and that's what we don't know.
It's a good sign. I think that's all those Detroit guys seem to know who they are, which I think one of the interesting things about the Aaron Glenn interview is that you get to ask Aaron Glenn, what does he think of Ben Johnson?
Yeah.
Especially because they're competing against each other for this job right now.
Right.
If Aaron Glenn wants that Pats job and he knows stuff about Ben Johnson, he can dish on him a little bit. If Ben Johnson's not all that behind the scenes, or even forget any kind of gossipy details, how much of the culture is Ben Johnson? How much of the play call? How much of the play design? How much of it's the talent? What how do we divvy up responsibility for what Detroit's offense has been, and how are his management skills? And you get to do the same for Johnson about Glenn. You basically get to play the two coordinators off one another here and learn about both.
Yeah, and Glenn's a guy you have a little bit of experience with, right? He was a defensive back for the Jets and the Texans and a few other teams, but like the Jets, you played him twice a year. And so you're familiar with that guy. I think he was an all pro, not all pro. I think he was a Pro Bowler 3 times during it. The third time was in Houston, but still, he had some good moments there where he was a good player. So you have some experience with him as a player, and then of course you've seen him as a coach and whatnot. And so it's a very interesting situation. Like I said, it changes the equation for me, because I was pissed when it was just going to be Ben Johnson and Vrabel. I don't know who's the better guy, right? Ultimately, I don't know. And we'll talk about that. But why don't we get into, because we never actually did this. Why don't we get into your last ad?
Yep.
After the ad, we'll talk about who are,
Should we hear what Schefter had to say about it on the EI?
Yes. So let's do your last ad. We'll listen to what Schefter had to say. We'll pick our best. And then we'll get out of here.
And let's pick some playoff games. We're not doing it for a competition or anything. We'll do it for fun.
Good call. I like it.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to talk to you guys about game time. It's NFL playoff season. We got games this weekend. It's a great time for football, by the way. We got games Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, Monday between college and the pros. It's going to be fantastic. Love the environment. And with Game Time Picks, you can go to one of these games. You can get these tickets even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to only show you the best deals on the best seats. So you have to waste time, searching through all kinds of listings. It's going to do all that work for you. You can just go in there, go to any playoff game that you want to go to. You're going to hit that Game Time Picks button, and it's going to filter it out. So you're just going to see the best seats, the best value seats all around the stadium. You want to sit in the nosebleeds, you want to sit in the 200s, you want to get right up close. It's going to show you the best, the cheapest way to get into any of those sections. You can hit all in pricing. So the price you see is going to be the price you pay. You can click on it and you're going to see, a view from that section. You get an idea what your seat view is going to be. You get on-time ticket delivery, lowest price guarantee, game time ticket coverage. So, I can't recommend it enough. I've used it myself many times. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
All right. Let's listen to Schefter here.
It's still totally tripping me up, by the way, that they removed the end of that ad read, but changed it up on me. But yeah, so Adam Schefter went on WEEI earlier today talking about the Patriots coaching search. So this is a snippet of what he had to say.
I believe there is definitely, there's 3 things there. I don't believe it's fait accompli with Vrabel and the Patriots. I think he's absolutely the leading candidate. He is the logical choice, and I think it probably would be a surprise if it didn't work out. But you could go through any number of coaching searches over time and say, well, Josh McDaniels is supposed to get the Colts job. Bill Belichick was supposed to get the Jets job. Things happen, and there's a lot of interest in Mike. Do I think that the Patriots hold a tremendous amount of appeal to him? Yes. Do I think he to them? Yes. Is it a lot? Of course. All those things are true. And in the end, it probably gets done. But I don't think it's done. I still think there's steps to go through. There's a process that has to be followed. Again, that's kind of where we're at. I don't think it's going to be a quick resolution this week. I don't expect that. Maybe I'm going to be wrong. And that's where I see things as we sit here today, Wednesday afternoon.
Yeah, so there's Adam Schefter. I think our biggest fear on Sunday was that they were going to try to shoe in a Vrabel. Right. Yeah. And it's what it sounds like is they still like Vrabel a lot, but they want to go through a full process and hear everyone out before making a decision.
Yeah. The only thing I don't love about the examples that he gave were Belichick and McDaniels. And in those situations, Belichick and McDaniels didn't get the job because they didn't want the job, right? And so that's the only thing I don't love about that. You know, Belichick and McDaniels, Belichick was the head coach of the Jets, for God's sakes, right? And McDaniels, for all intents and purposes, had been hired by the Colts before he backed out. So, you know, in that situation, I don't love that part of it. But you know, who knows, right? Who knows? And the fact that they're going through with the process. Look, Ben Johnson has been open with the fact that he is not even going to accept an interview from someone that he doesn't think is a good spot to be. He doesn't consider it to be a serious place. And so the fact that he's taking the interview here tells you that he at least has an inkling of the fact that, like, this is a serious thing. They actually do want to consider him for head coach.
Oh, I will say on that. That's what he has said for a while. The fact that Ben Johnson today at interviews with both the Jaguars and the Raiders makes me take that a little bit less seriously, because like I don't think there's a less serious job opening on the market right now than the Jags one, where you have to still deal with Trent Baalke.
Well, so you're not wrong about that. However, I also did hear that if the candidate they bring in doesn't want to work with Baalke, that they are willing to put someone above him.
Okay. All right.
So that he's
then
still there. And look, that roster is a good young roster. You know, you have Brian Thomas Jr. and you have Trevor Lawrence. Like, that's an appealing place to be.
Yeah. No, so that's fair. And I don't know if the Raiders are a great place. Not the richest franchise.
Yeah.
Not in the best draft spot, but they don't have a quarterback. But it is like we'll see with Ben Johnson.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, an example, think of here, like another example of maybe not getting your guy. Remember, you know who the Eagles really wanted to hire as their coach at one point? Mr. Ben McAdoo. And they missed out on Ben McAdoo, and they got Doug Peterson instead. And I think they are pretty okay with how that ended up turning out for them.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, of course they ended up having to fire him, but they won a Super Bowl. So, you know, they don't win the Super Bowl with Ben McAdoo, I can tell you that much.
No. Which I think this is one of the things that, you know, there's so many variables that go into being a coach. And like, I hope the Patriots get one of their top 3 choices here, as they've clearly indicated by interviewing. Yeah. I also don't think it's the end of the world if they don't. If Ben Johnson decides that he'd rather go back to Detroit and Aaron Glenn and Mike Vrabel decide to go elsewhere, like, if you want a former head coach who's a veteran, like we mentioned him on the last show, Arthur Smith worked under Mike Vrabel.
Right.
Has made Russell Wilson look kind of respectable this year, but a whole bunch of guys couldn't. Arthur Smith doesn't like get me excited or make me jump out of my chair, but neither would Doug Peterson have years ago. You don't know how this is going to turn out. This is
right. It's true.
And Josh McDaniels would have gotten me very excited if I was a team that was hiring that guy, and it has never worked out anywhere but New England.
No, it has not. No.
There's definitely some randomness in the same. You miss out on Ben Johnson, and let's say you land on Liam Cohen instead. I think Ben Johnson will be a better head coach than Liam Cohen would be. If you told me that Liam Cohen ends up being better than Ben Johnson, it wouldn't surprise me. Right. I mean, you're extrapolating from one job into a much bigger job that has very different tasks to it, and then mixing that with a ton of other variables. So, like, there's a lot of randomness to this.
Well, I mean, that's really right. That's what it comes down to. I mean, you know, the hard thing with Cohen, right? Obviously, he's got some time on the Rams staff under McVay. Did a few stints in Kentucky as the OC, and then, of course, came to Tampa as the OC. And someone did, I'm not sure who. Oh, it was I think it might have been Thad that said he's only been in Tampa for 1 year as the OC. But nevertheless, he was the OC for the Rams in 2022. Before that, so he's been an offensive coordinator for a bit.
And he was the offensive coordinator for Kentucky too, I believe.
He was the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach, which is interesting because I'm looking at the Wikipedia right now. He was with the Rams from 2018 to 2020. Yeah, assistant receivers coach, assistant quarterbacks coach. Then he went to Kentucky in 2021 as the OC and quarterbacks coach. Then he went to the Rams in 2022 as the OC. Then he went back to Kentucky in 2023 as the OC and quarterbacks coach. So, like, what? I don't. Okay.
Yeah, it's all you have to.
And then
investigate. Yeah, you have to investigate that series a little bit when you
it's a little
interview him.
strange. It's strange that he left Kentucky to go back to the Rams as the OC and then left an NFL OC job to go back to his old job as the OC. It's just, that seems strange.
And I remember, like, at the time, I remember it making sense hearing the reports, but I don't know why, and I have to like reinvestigate what it was.
I don't know. I'm not sure what it was either, but
should we talk about the top three here?
Yes, let's do it. Yep.
Should we just rank them in order of how much we want them?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think third here is going to be Aaron Glenn, and I don't think that's. I think we're on the same page.
I would agree. Yeah, I do wonder how he's going to interview, what his plan is, what his process is. I am curious about that. I think there's a chance that he could be a very good head coach, but I just don't. I feel like the other two are safer bets to be a very good head coach.
What I will say is this: I think he's third on my list. I also think in some ways, if they hired him, it would make me the most excited because of the fact that he seems to be third on their list.
Yeah.
Which means that something about the process meant, oh, we like this guy a lot more than the others, and we want to go in that direction.
Yep. Good point.
Which is exciting, but like you see the path for success for him. He's clearly smart as a coach. They've gotten better every year, that Detroit defense. And once they finally got talent, they turned into a top 10 unit, even though they haven't even had the talent this year. The guys have been hurt for a lot of it. And clearly a strong personality who works well with Dan Campbell. In some ways, he's what you wanted Gerard Mayo to be. A defensive coach, really good personality guy,
right?
Former player, like bringing that to it. So if he wowed in an interview, I'd get excited about that. I can easily see the path for success there.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good point. All right, who's number 2 on your list?
Number 2 for me is going to be Mike Vrabel. Is that are we seeing this the same way or not?
We are on the same page. We are on.
Okay, that interests me because I thought you were going to be a Vrabel guy.
So I listen. I love Mike Vrabel. Obviously, as a player, I loved Mike Vrabel. I love the way that he coaches as well. I like that he brings a little toughness and physicality to his football teams. I like that a lot. The biggest issue that I have with Mike Vrabel is that he is a Dan Campbell type guy in the fact that he needs very good coaches around him. I'm very interested to see what happens in Detroit after this year.
Yes.
Because as good as Dan Campbell is, and as much as I love what he does, right? He needs good coaches. If he loses his offensive coordinator and his defensive coordinator after this year, I don't know how they're going to react to that, how the team is going to respond to that, right? That brain drain, right, as has been famously referred to multiple times by media members around here, is a big deal, right? And Belichick struggled with it. So, when you have Dan Campbell, who's not really an X's and O's guy, you got to imagine he's going to struggle with it too. So it's the same thing with Mike Vrabel. Tell me, listen, if they hire Mike Vrabel, I'm not going to be upset. But now tell me who the offensive coordinator is.
Yeah, and
that's the biggest part of it for me.
Well, I think I think the pro that you could argue here with Mike Vrabel is that if he's your hire, it means that if the offense isn't working, you can always swap out the offensive coordinator without having to disrupt the overall team. The negative of hiring Mike Vrabel is that if you're good, your offensive coordinator is definitely going to get hired away, and you're going to have to hire a new one, and you're always going to be in that cycle.
Right.
Well,
the hope is you can build something, right?
Well, this is something he dealt with in Tennessee.
Yeah.
His offensive coordinator year 1 was Matt LaFleur. That worked.
Yep.
His offensive coordinator years 2 and 3, Arthur Smith. He got a head coaching job out of that.
Yep.
And then it was Todd Downing, I think, for the rest of the time there, who did a good job year 1. After that, not really. Then he's been a play caller for the Jets since they made changes during the year.
That's right.
He's kind of bounced around. He's kind of an interesting figure. The rumor is that the guy that Mike Vrabel would be bringing with him is Tommy Reese. I
Mhm.
don't know how I feel about him. He's a younger, run-focused guy.
Right.
I can see the appeal. I don't know if that's the guy I want. So, I think
It's hard to know. It's hard to know with these young guys. You just never know who's going to be good and who isn't.
and there's this idea that because Mike Vrabel not only has been a head coach before, but has been a head coach that won before, that he's the high floor guy here. I just don't agree with that, because part of that floor is that he hired some good offensive coordinators. When those guys left, the offense got worse. So what was
Right.
Mike Vrabel doing at that point to bring it up? And part of that is that Ryan Tannehill aged out and AJ Brown got traded, and
Right.
Derrick Henry isn't Derrick Henry. You can't utilize him fully unless you can give him some advantageous situations
Right.
of the running game. And the offensive line totally bottomed out there. Like, a lot of the issues, people brought up that Mike Vrabel's awesome, and they brought up the development of AJ Brown. You don't hear them talking about the development of Traylon Burks, the guy that was supposed to be the other receiver to replace him.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if I see him as a high floor guy. He had a couple really good seasons in Tennessee. You know who else was a tough, hard edge, physical coach who never really bottomed out and had a couple really good seasons? You want to know who I'm thinking of here?
I would love to know, because I don't know who it is.
Also a guy who coached from Tennessee, a guy who had his success there. Jeff Fisher.
Jeff Fisher. Oh, Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
500. I think he finished his career at 500, did he not?
Something like that, which I guess that is a high floor guy. Maybe that's what Mike Vrabel ends up being. Maybe he ends up being a fantastic coach, someone who, they've had a lot of turmoil in the front office in Tennessee, and maybe the bad drafts were just bad drafts and had nothing to do with player development. And, you learn something from this year in Cleveland, especially on the offensive side with some analytics development, and you go into your next head coaching stint, and it's amazing. So that's why I don't agree that Vrabel is a high floor, low ceiling type coach that some people have portrayed it as. I think he's just as low a floor and high a ceiling as Ben Johnson is. Because the ceiling is high because he's still relatively young, experienced, a guy who's done it before, who's been there before, who might be able to take that Dan Campbell-ness, but with a second approach here, be able to take it to another level and bring that culture to New England and, keep the stock full of talent. If he ended up being a winning coach for a long time in the NFL, that wouldn't shock me. He seems like a very hard worker, passionate guy, leader of men who has taken the time to learn more about the game in his year off here. So that's the type that ends up winning a lot too. You see those guys do well.
Yep. Yeah.
I like
that.
Yeah.
So Old Man Bob
That's
a good question. So we have Ben Johnson obviously as our number one guy, but Old Man Bob asked, can we give 2 DCs that Ben Johnson would bring in and 2 OCs that Vrabel would bring with him? The DC, and actually Thad kind of brings up 2 that I like a lot is Lou Anarumo, which I butchered that name, but that's okay. And Robert Salah. I think those 2 guys make a ton of sense as DCs.
I kind of feel like Salah's going back to San
Probably,
Francisco.
I would think he's going back to San Francisco, but if you could entice him with a DC job, working with a young, up-and-coming head coach like Ben Johnson, that may not be a terrible thing. You might be able to get that from him. Anarumo makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, and here's I like, if we're talking about of the offensive coordinators and the defensive coordinators that these guys could hire, who we think the best is, I think I like the fit of Anarumo the best. And I have my questions about Anarumo. Outside, I feel like a lot of his legacy is one game in Arrowhead.
Yeah, I know.
He has 1 year ever where he's been in the top half of the league as a defensive coordinator in points allowed. 1. Yeah, and it's also the only one where he was in the top half in yards. A lot of that's probably a Cincinnati issue, but they banked on being able to develop talent to fill guys who left. They didn't, and that's why Anarumo is out. All of that said, Anarumo's schemes are versatile, and aggressive, and he likes to blitz in a lot of different ways, which is something the Patriots have been trying to do. So in terms of a guy, like what I want the coordinator to be for either one of those is someone who can essentially be a head coach of that unit, I think, and take it over without issue.
Right.
And especially on the defensive side, you want someone year one at least, if you're Ben Johnson, who can come in, steady the ship, provide professional level coaching, take the players that you already had and put them in a good spot, and then you go from there.
Yeah.
And I think Anarumo is kind of the perfect fit for that. Schematically, there's a lot of similarities, so you're not asking the players to do anything crazy that they've never done before. Like, I like Saleh, but I don't think Christian Gonzalez is maximized in a Robert Saleh scheme. Like, Robert Saleh's scheme is rushing 4, asking your linebackers to do a ton in coverage, and having your corners and safeties play deep zone coverage. That is the worst possible use, I think, of the players that this team
100%.
has right now.
Yeah.
I'm like, I think you hire Anarumo and he might be gone in 2 years, but that's fine. You're trying to get over that initial hump with that hire, is my guess. And like, I like him more than I like Tommy Reese for offensive coordinator under Vrabel.
Well, and that's the thing with Vrabel is that it's difficult to pick out an OC. I can tell you, like, maybe not quite last on the list, but really far down my list is Josh McDaniels. I have zero interest in Josh McDaniels coming back here to New England. I just don't get it. I don't see it. Dan and Dad in the chat are talking about Brian Daboll. I would have loved to have seen the Giants fire Brian Daboll. I would have been all in on Vrabel and Daboll. I would have been all in on that because I feel like Daboll would have been a good OC. He's a guy that, developed, or helped develop Josh Allen and has experience with that. And now you're looking at Drake May saying he could be the next Josh Allen. Let's bring in the offensive coordinator that worked with Josh Allen. I think that would have made a ton of sense. But, that's not going to happen, it seems like. So, I don't really know exactly where they're going to go. That's the hard thing for me is that I don't know exactly what's going to happen. By the way, Spectre Des asked the likelihood of May regressing with Ben Johnson. I don't see how May could regress with Ben Johnson unless AVP was just that good of a coach. But like the infrastructure of the team was a mess. Like nobody was playing up to their full potential. So like, I wonder if, what I'm hoping is that everyone improves next year.
I also wonder if, Alex Van Pelt could stay on under a Ben Johnson. They're both guys who are about the trenches and run first. And like, they're both guys who really like a weird trick play.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
So I could see a world where Van Pelt would stay on with Ben Johnson, and you're going to change over a lot of the offensive staff, but you're going to leave, Van Pelt to kind of help you design your plays, help design your game plans, and Ben Johnson's going to call the plays, and in game, Van Pelt's going to serve a little bit more as your quarterback's coach to work with May. I
like that idea a lot. Yeah.
Keeps the communicative line there where, May's got someone in the building he already knows who's an ally who he can work with. That's it. Go listen to Ben Johnson speak at a press conference. He sounds like someone who would get along really well with Drake May. Like they speak the same way about things. Like you hear just that little Southern accent in there, former UNC quarterback, but Ben Johnson was up at BC for a while. So he gets some of the Northeast. I think that connection would be really strong. And when I'm going for a head coaching hire, I'm swinging for the fences with it. When you have a quarterback like May, I want to maximize him. From what we have seen of the candidates available, Ben Johnson, I think, is the best to maximize what Drake May can do on the football field. Now, to be a head coach, you have to do a lot more than just that. So I would want to make sure he checks all the boxes in the interviews, that the people around him have good things to say. If you can, drag it out until the 20th where you can see him in person and do that. Do that.
I think you kind of have to. I don't think you can hire him without bringing him in person.
Yeah, so this might take a little bit for New England to get to that point, and you go with that. I do wonder if bringing in Aaron Glenn is also kind of your Mike Vrabel insurance here, in that if Vrabel signs with someone this week, all right, well, we have somebody else as part of our interview process. You probably want to see him bring in at least one other person to interview if that's how they're looking at that, just in case. But
Yeah.
I think as long as Ben Johnson checks the box through the whole process, which I'd have a hard time imagining he wouldn't, because it seemed like he did for Washington last year. And it's
Supposedly he's not a good interviewer, but like I think that that's just because he is more. I wouldn't say laid back isn't the way I'd put it, but he's not as like gregarious and outgoing as some other guys are, and that may rub people the wrong way.
Well, I think with that one, first of all, didn't that come out after Washington last year? That might just be a
So could
spurt
just be
X.
smoke. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it could also be that it's been pretty clear that Ben Johnson is interviewing the teams as much as the teams are interviewing him, and I
True.
would not be surprised if that ruffled some feathers along the way.
Mhm.
Like
Fair
this is a
point.
guy who's too cocky for this, and owners might not like that.
That's
And
a fair
I
point.
guarantee you there are at least a number of owners in this league who do not like being pressed by people on their football operation stuff. So
That's
that
definitely
would,
true.
yeah. So, and it's possible Ben Johnson's just also bad at it, but it was clear from the process that the Commanders wanted him last year.
Right.
If they wanted him, then he checked enough boxes for them. It's been another year or so. Presumably he has learned something from that, hopefully grown and learned the right lessons from everything that's happened in those 12 months.
You would
And
think. Yeah.
I'm willing to take that chance because if it pays off, he's going to be your head coach for all of Drake May's career. And you'll never have to worry about the offense or the system around May for the entirety of it.
Which would
And
be
if you
incredible.
I see the benefits of a defensive coach. We've seen them here in New England for a long time in that
Right.
it takes everything else off of the quarterback and he can just kind of go play because, it's always going to be good field position. You're never going to have to score a lot to win.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
advantages there, but
We'll see.
yeah.
So, all
I
right, let's
talked
get
a
into,
lot, so you can talk a little here quickly.
I'm
about
good.
it.
I'm good. Let's
Okay.
get into the picks for the weekend. There's nothing else we need to talk about, I don't think, at least right now. Look, we'll see what happens, right? At the end of the day, if Vrabel comes in, he needs a really good OC and a really good DC. Now, my dad texted me. He's right. Every coach needs good coaches around him. You're not wrong about that. I get that, right? But I'm really concerned about what the offensive coordinator is going to look like if it's him. If you're Ben Johnson and he comes in, I hadn't considered the idea of AVP staying, and Dan actually mentioned that, right? I think that's really interesting. He's not necessarily taking a demotion. He's technically the OC, right? But he's not calling the plays.
Returning to the role he had in Cleveland, essentially.
Right. And I think that would be really interesting for the Patriots, and to say, hey, look, you've worked really well with this kid. We want to keep you on. I would try to do the same thing with TC McCartney and leave him there. And just kind of go from there and see what's happening. See if you can, continue the trajectory of Drake May and then improve the in-game play calling as well.
Yeah. And to that effect, I think it might be notable. Maybe it isn't. We're still early in this, but it might be notable that DeMarcus Covington has gotten the opportunity to interview elsewhere, we'll say. And it seems like Alex Van Pelt and Jeremy Springer have not, which might be one of these guys feels like he's going to have to start taking some interviews. And the other two aren't so sure about what things are going to look like here going forward.
Right.
Also, one other note here on if, a situation where it's Van Pelt with Ben Johnson, what that also offers up for Johnson is the ability to be CEO head coach if he wants to. If he feels comfortable with Alex Van Pelt, that means that he can say, hey, this game or this series, you're going to take over play calling duties, and I'm going to go over and work with the defense for a little bit and do that because you have someone you feel really comfortable and confident in there.
It's a fair point.
Yeah. And, maybe they just clean house, but that's also still the most likely, I think.
Well, of course, right? But, we'll see. But at least there's a chance. All right, let's get into the weekend. First game, the Houston Texans special. Houston Texans have played have played a ton of games in the play. Every single one they've played has been on Saturday at 4:30. every single
when they
one.
host a wild card game. Yeah.
When they host a wild card game. Yep. So they are hosting the Chargers. Chargers are actually favored by 3.
Yeah.
In this game. This one's interesting to me. I'm going to pick the Chargers, but I think Houston's being slept on just a little bit. I do think that they can kind of pull things together, and I wouldn't necessarily be shocked if Houston wins this game, but I think the Chargers do win.
I think it should be kind of ugly and low scoring, which does open you up to one weird freak play decides the game. I think the Chargers are the better team. I called in November that this was going to be the matchup and the Chargers were going to win it. So I can't back off that take now. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Give me LA in this one. Jim Harbaugh's the better coach. Justin Herbert's the better quarterback. Chargers have the better defense here.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's going to matter.
So next game, the Saturday night game, the other AFC North battle, 9.5 points. Pittsburgh's getting 9.5 points against Baltimore. Now, is Baltimore a better team than Pittsburgh?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. But it's 9.5 points, dude. It's a lot of points for two teams that typically play very, very tight games. It would be surprising to me if it was a 10-point win for them. We'll see.
Now, would you say they play close game? They mostly play close games. The last time these two teams played was less than a month ago in Baltimore, and the Ravens won by 17 points.
Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Like this is, I was talking to somebody the other day, and I was like, you look at the two scores of the games they played this year, and both of them seem equally likely. When the Ravens win, it's 34-17. It's because their offense takes over,
right?
And Pittsburgh can't match it. Steelers won the first meeting in November. They won it 18-16. Why?
Right.
Because they are going to drag you kicking and screaming down into the mud where you're not comfortable, and then they're going to beat you there.
Right.
I don't think they're going to do it in this game. I think the Ravens would do good. I think they cover, too. Like, I'm taking Baltimore. Nothing would surprise me when these two teams play.
All right. Hey, you never know. It certainly could happen.
These are, hold on. So let me go back for a second because you mentioned the close games. Because I mentioned the blowout. These are their games before that. There's the 18-16 one that I mentioned. The one before that, 17-10 Pittsburgh. The one before that, 17-10 Pittsburgh. Before that, 16-13 Pittsburgh. 16-14 Baltimore. 16-13 Pittsburgh in overtime. 20-19 Pittsburgh. 19-14 Pittsburgh. And then you finally get one where they're both in the 20s, 28-24 Pittsburgh. Just a whole bunch of that mud fighting right there.
And that's kind of my point. Lamar in the playoffs, ton of pressure on him to perform in the playoffs, playing against the Steelers. I think that it's going to be closer than people expect. 9.5 points is a lot of points. And so I think it's going to be closer than people expect it to be. That's all. Yeah. I don't think the Steelers are going to win. I do still think the Ravens are going to win, but I think it's going to be closer than people expect it to be.
Fair.
So
yeah, that blowout has been an anomaly.
Yeah. So, all right, 1:00 game on Sunday. Denver in Buffalo. Buffalo's getting 8.5 points, and I don't think it's enough. I think Buffalo's going to blow doors on Denver. I think Denver's a good team. They're a fun team to watch, but I think Buffalo's on a little bit of a mission right now. And Josh Allen's playing the best football of his career right now. Buffalo looks like a wagon. And so they're going to be awfully difficult to beat, especially at home. I like Buffalo in this game.
That's how I felt. And then I kind of had a realization here. If there's any team that could execute the game plan the Patriots went up there with a couple weeks ago and lost with, I think it might be this Denver team. Because that game plan is to go play aggressive man coverage.
Yep.
And try to force Josh Allen to make plays happen with contested catches and all that. And offensively to play ball control.
Yeah.
Denver,
it's certainly possible.
That's Denver's whole thing. I think Buffalo's better. I think Buffalo wins. I think Josh Allen is just too much better. I would take Denver to cover, though. I think this ends up being a closer game than people think.
I can see that. I think Buffalo is on a little bit of a mission. Now it's their first postseason game. Certainly possible they could have a little bit of jitters, and get a little bit of a slower start, but we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. I think it'll end up being lower scoring than people think.
You might be right. The over is 47, so maybe you take the under.
Yeah.
4:30 game on Sunday. Green Bay at Philadelphia. Philadelphia's minus 4.5 against Green Bay. The biggest note about this game is that Jalen Hurts has not yet been cleared for practice. Has not yet cleared concussion protocol. I believe that they practiced today. I didn't see if he did practice or not.
Looks like he was out there.
I think he practiced, right?
Jalen Hurts, limited participant today. A.J. Brown also limited, yeah.
So he was out there throwing. Now, here's the thing, right? In order for him to clear concussion protocol, he has to go through a practice and then wake up the next morning and then get tested again. And at that point, he can clear concussion protocol. So tomorrow is a big day for Philadelphia. If he does not clear concussion protocol tomorrow, I would start to panic a little bit if I were an Eagles fan. And so we'll see. But that's what I would be worried about. I don't know if Green Bay has enough to keep up with Philadelphia. I think Green Bay is a team that goes back and forth. Sometimes they can be really, really good, and sometimes they can be just not very good at all. Josh Jacobs has been fantastic this year. Jordan Love is up and down, but ultimately, assuming Hurts plays, Philadelphia wins, in my opinion. But Green Bay, they're Jekyll and Hyde a little bit, but when they're good, they're really good. They can turn that on for one game consistently, all game against them. They have a chance.
Here's the thing. The fact that we are waiting on Jordan Love injury news here too. I think he's going to play. Yeah. It's weird. I do think the Eagles win. I think the Eagles cover because I think Hurts is going to play, and I think they're just too much for that Packers defense. This seems like one of those games that will end up high 30s to high 20s in score. I think it'll be a really fun game. Close for most, and Philly pulls away at the end. Feels again like the recipe for the Eagles here. I'm going to take them. Green Bay though, they're the sleeper. If they win this game, they have potential to really ruin stuff, especially if they go into Detroit first thing, and that could be a very fun ball.
That'd be a wild game. All right, next up, last game on Sunday Night Football, Washington in Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay -3, which means Vegas basically has a toss-up. This is going to be the highest scoring game of the weekend, I think. These two teams light it up offensively for the most part. Their defenses both aren't fantastic, although Washington's defense has been better. But should be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to this game. I actually think Washington is going to win as the road team. And so you'd have, 2 road wins in this case. I like them a lot in this situation.
I'm taking Washington. I don't think Tampa's defense can stop them. I don't know how good Washington actually is, but I think this is a bad matchup for Tampa. That's my guess. I do think it's high scoring though.
Yeah, it's going to be. We'll see, but should be a fun game. All right, Monday Night Football, last game of the weekend. Minnesota at LA. Minnesota -1. Road favorites. This comes down to Sam Darnold. In my opinion, this comes down to Sam Darnold. If Sam Darnold plays like he played on Sunday night, Minnesota loses.
Yes.
If he plays like he's played the majority of the year, Minnesota wins.
Yep.
And he has an opportunity to cost himself hundreds of millions of dollars by not playing well. If he comes and balls out and plays really well, and then theoretically goes into Detroit, or if Washington wins, I guess they would go to Philly. But if he can go there and play well, I think that really changes things, and the opinion of him around the league, I think, would be a little bit higher, right? Because now you're still looking at saying, well, last week was basically a playoff game against the Lions. You lost. Now you're in another playoff game and you play crap again and lose again. Yeah, maybe you're just the old Sam Darnold. And, Kevin O'Connell was covering for things, but you're not really that guy, If he shows up in the playoffs and plays really well, maybe you convince a few people that you really are that guy and you deserve that, $35 million a year, whatever it is. So it's going to be a huge, huge game for him.
Yeah, I agree. I think Minnesota gets it done. I don't think we're going to get that Sam Darnold 2 games in a row.
I can't imagine, no.
That said, it scares the hell out of me for what that could look like the rest of the playoffs, because that feels like a trap door for Minnesota that they can fall through at any point. And
right.
The lights got too bright for him. If Minnesota somehow gets to the Super Bowl here, which is definitely possible with their path, you get through this depending on what your matchup ends up being. Probably going to have 1 or 2 more tough road games, but if Washington gets through, in theory, you could host the NFC Championship. Maybe and you come back at home. I don't know. We'll see.
That'd be crazy.
If you're able to play through all this and get to the Super Bowl, are the lights too bright for you then? Do you play amazing football for 3 weeks and go on a heater, take 1 week off, go to the Super Bowl, and it's week 18 Sam Darnold again, and you got to go face Mahomes or Josh Allen or Lamar in the Super Bowl, and it's just a complete blowout because
certainly could be.
So I'm taking Minnesota because I just think they're the better team here. But it should be a fantastic game. I think it's gonna be really close.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it for sure. So it's gonna be a fun weekend. It's gonna be a really fun weekend. Did we differ on any picks in there? Or did we have the same picks for everything? For winners? I thought we had the same picks in there. I thought.
So if our picks are correct, the games you get in the divisional round, Ravens at Bills, that would be electric. That would be a ton of fun. And Chargers at Chiefs.
I think the Chargers could win that game. I really do.
I think so too. And then the NFC, Vikings at Eagles, which I feel like that is the stuff of nightmares for that Vikings team. This is something they got to get over. And then Washington at Detroit.
Yeah. That would be a hell of a fun game. My goodness.
It would be. I also feel like that's probably the matchup you want if you're Detroit.
Absolutely. Yeah. Rookie quarterback. Absolutely. Yeah.
Team that's kind of outkicked their coverage overall this season. That's you'd much rather have that over one of the other wildcard teams that's a division rival and knows you well.
I would agree. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And I think you want it over the Rams with how hot that offense can get. Maybe not. But.
Yeah, but maybe. You might be right. I think I would prefer the Rams over the Commanders, but the Rams have also been playing really well lately. So, who knows?
Yeah.
So,
all right. Is that a show?
Let's get these people the hell out of here. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We appreciate it. 90 minutes in. We appreciate you guys staying with us and tuning in. We're going to be back, I don't know, at some point talking about the talking about the playoffs and also what happens with the head coaching search, right? Vrabel's coming in on Thursday. Ben Johnson's meeting virtually on Friday. We don't know for sure what the Aaron Glenn situation is just yet, but I'm sure we'll find that out soon. And then we'll go from there. So
if there's a coaching decision, you're going to be hearing from us.
We'll be live. That's correct. Yes, that is correct. I have games tomorrow night and Friday night, but we will be live after one of my games and we'll go from there. So, anyways, thanks for tuning in, everyone. We appreciate you. Be good to each other and go Pats.